When MSI announced the GE66 Raider during the CES 2020, I got really excited, not just because of its fancy new design, but also because of all the high-end components you can shove into this chassis. The review sample we received from MSI Malaysia comes with Intel Core i9-10980HK, 32GB of DDR4 RAM, 2TB of NVMe SSD in RAID 0 configuration, and NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2080 Super Max Q. That goes without saying, don't expect this laptop to come cheap. This kind of setup requires you to fork out about 15,999 ringgit Malaysia. Meanwhile, the lower configuration comes at 11,999 ringgit Malaysia. Let's find out what you can expect from GE66 right after this. If you still remember the GE63 Raider RGB, that laptop is filled with RGB to the brim, where even the lid itself has two bright RGB strips. That feature only lasted for a generation and didn't make a comeback on the GE65 Raider. Even though the chassis design is pretty much the same, this time however, GE66 Raider somehow brings back the RGB spirit with this disco light. This kind of flashy RGB is an exact opposite of the GS66 Stealth. In other words, MSI has two different products to cater to a different group of users. This piece of smoke acrylic covers the whole front keyboard deck and diffuses the light effect, which can be seen from various angles, from the bottom here, from the front, and even from the top. Fortunately, the lighting effect is quite classy. It's not like super blindingly bright. But one thing I hope MSI could have improved is the flush between the keyboard deck and this acrylic piece here. I mean, it can get really uncomfortable, especially when you place your wrist on it when you're typing. So do something with this. Now, in terms of the overall design, MSI started this new team with the GT76. I'm really liking this kind of design over here, and especially with this new MSI Dragon Shield logo over here. Now, the lid opens up to about 130 or 140 degrees, somewhere about that, and it looks amazing. It is a 15.6-inch IPS panel that comes with Full HD resolution. It has 240Hz refresh rate and 99% sRGB color gamut coverage, good for both gaming and basic color work. Now, the keyboard deck is quite sturdy thanks to the aluminium construction. This is one of my favorite laptop keyboards I have tested so far. Each of the keys has decent sized surface, and most importantly, the travel distance and feedback is just about right for me to churn out articles after articles. However, not that I would say the same to the trackpad. This trackpad is mediocre at best. Number one, the clicking mechanism is quite bad because it is quite stiff. I'm not too sure what's going on with the clicking mechanism underneath it. Now, fortunately, the finger tracking and gesture tracking is pretty good so far, thanks to the Microsoft Precision Touchpad driver for that. Then again, this is a gaming laptop. If you game on this laptop, for sure you will have to use a gaming mouse. The I/O selection is very generous on this laptop. Now, looking at the back over here, we can see we've got one mini display port, one USB Type-C port that also supports display output, 1 gigabit Ethernet port, one full-size HDMI port, and this single charging port, which is like flat kind of charging port, just like those Lenovo laptops, they have it. But I don't think they are shareable among each another. Now, moving on to the left hand side over here, we got one 3.5mm audio jack and one USB Type-C port 20 gigabit and one USB Type-A port 10 gigabit. On the right hand side over here, we got another two USB Type-A ports and one SD card reader, full-size SD card reader. Now, at this point, some of you guys might be asking why MSI did not include Thunderbolt 3 on this laptop. Well, from my point of view, number one, the adoption rate is quite low. Number two, we realized that some of those people who always complain why there is no Thunderbolt 3 are those who never really use Thunderbolt 3 ports. Because If you are using Thunderbolt 3, you will look for a laptop with Thunderbolt 3 instead of complaining on them. Now, one thing I don't really talk a lot is laptop speakers. We all know how terrible most of the bottom firing speakers sounds like. Now, if you look closely at the side of the GE66, you will notice an array of micro holes, which is actually for the side firing speakers. Now, truth be told, I'm not expecting anything from this laptop until I actually use it, and I'm immediately blown away by the sound quality. Now, that's the difference you can actually hear when the hardware is well positioned. It fires sideways, you can hear a lot of different sound from there, and most importantly, the sound stage is very nice instead of like those reflected, moody kind of sound effect from the table. Now, let's shift our focus to the performance. The Intel Core i9-10980HK is falling short when it comes to the CPU performance, especially with the multi-core score. It performs roughly similar to the Intel Core i7-10875H, with the exception of the single-core performance doing a better job than the rest. It seems to us that the CPU governor is not as aggressive as the competition's i7 counterpart, presumably to keep the temperature in check. We can see the overall frame rates are higher than the Zephyrus S15, even though the GE66 was supposed to be losing out on the synthetic benchmarks. Again, it is not just the gaming performance that caught us by surprise. Even the gaming temperature is something we did not expect. The GPU temperature never once went past the 70 degrees Celsius barrier. There is a stark contrast when comparing with the Zephyrus S15. The S15 CPU runs cooler. Maybe it is due to the use of the liquid metal thermal compound. Meanwhile, the GE66, even though the CPU temperature is slightly higher, but at 98 degrees maximum, it is not something I would really worry about. When it comes to the upgradability, you might need to take extra precaution when removing the bottom chassis. MSI uses quite a number of plastic latches and clips to hold the bottom cover in place, so you will have to slowly pry open to prevent damaging it. Once you get into the laptop, there are 2 RAM slots and 2 M.2 slots available for you to upgrade. In our review sample, those slots are pretty much occupied with high-end components, unless your wallet can afford 2 sticks of 2TB of SSD. Another thing MSI kept posting is the 99.9 Wh internal battery. Yes, my friends, MSI literally give this laptop a battery that is 0.1 Wh away from the maximum limit for a device that can be able to check into a flight. Our initial test didn't go that well because the battery just go down in 50% in just 1 hour. Then we realized the gaming mode was turned on inside the MSI Dragon Center, and on top of that, the display did not switch to 60Hz when we unplugged the laptop. Hopefully this can be resolved to reduce the hassle and confusion among the users. Now, after we changed the display to 60Hz, and of course the Dragon Center will change to a silent power mode, this laptop can easily extract 6 hours of use time. The MSI GE66 Raider in Malaysia comes in 2 configurations. The price starts from 11,999 ringgit Malaysia to 15,999 ringgit Malaysia for RTX 2070 and RTX 2080 Max-Q respectively. The decision to use Intel Core i9 feels like a marketing gimmick, as the real-world usage hardly justifies the need of it. Then again, we're not too sure what kind of price difference that would be given if MSI has chosen to use the Intel Core i7. Looking at the competition, the closest one should be the ROG Zephyrus S15 series. Despite the close pricing, however, I see this GE66 as a completely different product for a different group of users. As I mentioned earlier, this laptop is for those who want a high-end gaming laptop with the capability to personalize with fancy custom RGB lighting. Meanwhile, the GS66 and the Zephyrus S15 is more for those who want a low-profile design. Overall, I enjoyed using the GE66 Raider over here, and I do hope MSI could have improved more on the build quality itself. Do let us know what do you guys think about this laptop, and do you think RGB is still a thing? Yeah, that's all, and I'll see you guys in the next video.